The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils as I paced the sterile corridor, my worn sneakers squeaking against the polished hospital floor. 14 hours into a double shift, and my scrubs clung to me like a second skin, coffee stains mapping the exhaustion of my day. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, checking my watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. 3 more hours until I could go home to Elijah. My 5-year-old son was the only brightness in my otherwise dim existence. Since his father vanished 2 years ago, taking our savings and leaving nothing but debts, I'd been working myself to the bone as a nurse at Metropolitan General Hospital. Between shifts, student loans, and childcare, I barely kept our heads above water. Madison, we need you in room 307. Nancy, the head nurse, appeared at my elbow, her expression grim. Car accident. Multiple victims. I nodded, swallowing my fatigue. This was the job, pushing personal problems aside to tend to others in their worst moments. I followed her down the corridor, mentally preparing myself for whatever awaited in room 307. Nothing could have prepared me for him. The first thing I noticed was the silence that fell over the nurses' station, as 3 men in immaculate suits passed through. The tallest one, a broad-shouldered figure with cold, calculating eyes, glanced my way, and I instinctively lowered my gaze. The air around him seemed to thicken, making it harder to breathe. "Who's that?" I whispered to Nancy when they were out of earshot. Her eyes widened. "You don't know? That's Alessio Moretti. Don't ever get involved with him, Madison. He owns half this city, the darker half." The name sent a chill down my spine. Everyone in Eastbrook knew of the Moretti family, whispered tales of their business dealings, their ruthlessness, their power. I'd heard rumors that they'd donated the new hospital wing last year after a suspicious fire claimed their rival's warehouse. I pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the patient in 307, a young woman with a broken arm and minor contusions from the car accident. I worked methodically, checking vitals, adjusting medication, offering what comfort I could. 3 hours later, I clocked out, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. I called Mrs. Peterson, Elijah's babysitter, as I hurried toward the bus stop. "I'm just leaving now. Should be there in 40 minutes. Madison." Her voice was tight with concern. "I've been trying to reach you. Elijah's not feeling well. He's been complaining of headaches since school, and now he's running a fever." My heart stuttered. "How high?" 101.3. I gave him children's Tylenol an hour ago, but he's still warm. "I'm coming right now." I quickened my pace, anxiety propelling me forward. My son rarely got sick, and when he did, it hit him hard. A complication from his premature birth had left his immune system slightly compromised. The bus was late, of course. By the time it arrived, rain had started to fall, soaking through my thin jacket. I spent the entire ride with my knees bouncing, checking my phone every minute. When I finally reached Mrs. Peterson's apartment, my hands were shaking as I knocked on the door. She opened it immediately, her face lined with concern. "He's sleeping now, but he was asking for you." I rushed past her to where Elijah lay on the couch, his dark curls damp with sweat, cheeks flushed with fever. Kneeling beside him, I pressed my lips to his forehead. Still too warm. "Hey, baby," I whispered, stroking his hair back. His eyes fluttered open, revealing fever-bright irises the exact shade of copper that had once made my heart race for their father. "Mommy," he murmured, his small hand reaching for mine. "My head hurts." "I know, sweetheart." I checked his pulse, slightly elevated but not concerning. "We're going home now, okay? You can rest in your own bed." Mrs. Peterson hovered nearby. "I can call a cab for you. We'll be fine," I assured her, though my bank account disagreed. "It's just a few blocks." I gathered Elijah in my arms, wrapping him in his favorite dinosaur blanket. He was getting heavier. Soon I wouldn't be able to carry him like this. But tonight, I'd find the strength. After thanking Mrs. Peterson and promising to update her, I stepped back into the rain. The 6 blocks to our apartment felt like miles. The rain had intensified, and Elijah grew restless in my arms, whimpering with discomfort. I murmured soothing nonsense. quickening my pace as much as I dared on the slippery sidewalk. We were halfway home when Elijah suddenly stiffened in my arms. His eyes rolled back, his small body going rigid before beginning to convulse. Elijah! Terror seized me as I lowered him to the ground, turning him onto his side as I'd been trained to do. Baby, please. The seizure lasted 23 seconds. I counted every eternal one before his body relaxed, but he didn't wake up. His breathing was shallow, his skin burning with fever. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands, dialing 911. My son. He's had a seizure and he's unconscious, I gasped to the operator. We're on Pine Street near the intersection with 9th. An ambulance is on the way, the calm voice assured me. Stay with him. Is he breathing? Yes, but it's shallow. I held my hand above his mouth, feeling the weak puffs of air. Please hurry. Rain pounded mercilessly as I cradled Elijah's limp form, shielding him as best I could with my body. I was soaked through, shivering, but all I felt was the burning heat of my son's fever against my chest. A sleek black car slowed beside us, its tires hissing on the wet asphalt. The rear window lowered and a man's face appeared. Handsome, stern, vaguely familiar. Do you need help? He called over the rain. Under normal circumstances, I would never accept help from a stranger in an expensive car. But these weren't normal circumstances. My son was unconscious in my arms, and every second counted. My son needs a hospital, I managed, my voice breaking. Without hesitation, the back door opened, and the man stepped out, unmindful of the rain soaking his clearly expensive suit. He approached us quickly, kneeling down beside us. I have a driver. We can get him there faster than waiting for an ambulance. I hesitated for only a moment before nodding. The man scooped Elijah from my arms with surprising gentleness, and I followed him to the car, sliding into the luxurious leather interior. Metropolitan General, the man instructed his driver, before turning to me. What happened? Fever, then a seizure. He's never had one before. I gathered Elijah back into my arms, my nurse's training kicking in as I monitored his breathing. His skin was still frighteningly hot. The car moved smoothly through the rain-slicked streets, far faster than any bus could have managed. I glanced at the man beside me, taking in his sharp features, the expensive cut of his suit, the way he sat with an innate confidence that spoke of power and privilege. Thank you, I said, my voice small in the quiet interior of the car. He nodded once, his eyes never leaving my son's face. There was something in that gaze, a kind of recognition that made no sense. We'd never met before tonight, had we? The car pulled up directly to the emergency entrance. Before I could reach for the door, the man was already out, opening my side and helping me with Elijah. A security guard started to approach, probably to tell us we couldn't park there, but stopped abruptly when he recognized my rescuer. Inside, nurses I worked with daily barely glanced at me before their eyes widened at the man accompanying us. Dr. Miller appeared as if summoned by magic. Mr. Moretti, he said, with a deference I'd never heard him use with anyone. What seems to be the problem, Moretti? The name echoed in my head, connecting with the whispered conversations in the hospital corridors. Alessio Moretti, the man Nancy had warned me about just hours ago. I swallowed hard, finding my voice. My son had a febrile seizure. He's been unconscious for about 15 minutes now. Dr. Miller nodded, gesturing for a gurney. I laid Elijah down gently, brushing his damp curls back from his forehead. Fever started this afternoon, I continued, falling into the clinical report I'd given countless times as a nurse. 101.3 initially. No previous history of seizures. He's 5 years old, slightly immunocompromised from premature birth at 32 weeks. We'll take good care of him, Madison, Dr. Miller assured me, his hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he'd ever used my first name. As they wheeled Elijah away, I moved to follow, but my legs suddenly felt like water. I stumbled, and a strong hand caught my elbow, steadying me. When did you last eat? Moretti's deep voice was closer than I expected. I blinked, trying to remember. Breakfast, maybe? I don't know. He guided me to a chair, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands that were rumored to have ordered unspeakable things. "Stay here. I'll get you some coffee." Before I could protest, he strode away, his presence parting the crowded waiting room like Moses at the Red Sea. I sat there, dripping rainwater onto the linoleum floor, trying to process the surreal turn my evening had taken. Alessio Moretti returned with a steaming cup of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Eat," he said, not a request, but a command. "You can't help your son if you collapse." I accepted both with murmured thanks, suddenly aware of my disheveled appearance next to his imposing perfection. Despite the rain, he looked merely dampened rather than drowned. His dark hair was slightly wet at the temples, making him look unexpectedly human. "Why are you helping us?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, that someone would question him so directly. "Your son needed help," he said simply. "I was there." It was a perfectly reasonable answer that somehow felt incomplete. I sipped the coffee, strong and sweet, exactly how I needed it, and tried to ignore the curious glances from other waiting patients. No doubt they were wondering what connection I could possibly have to someone like him. I had the same question. An hour passed in tense silence. Moretti made several phone calls, speaking in rapid Italian that I couldn't understand. Occasionally, hospital staff would approach him with deferential smiles, offering updates that should have been given to me. Each time, he redirected them my way with a subtle but firm gesture. Finally, Dr. Miller returned, his expression carefully neutral. "Madison, can we speak privately?" I stood immediately, my heart in my throat. "Is Elijah?" "He's stable," he assured me quickly. "But I'd like to discuss his condition in my office." I nodded, relief making me lightheaded. I turned to Moretti, uncertain of the proper protocol. Did one thank a Mafia boss and send him on his way? "Go," he said, before I could speak. "I'll wait." Why would he wait? We were nothing to him, just a random encounter in the rain. But I didn't have the energy to question it. I followed Dr. Miller down the familiar corridor to his office, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. "Please sit down, Madison." Dr. Miller gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Elijah's fever was caused by a viral infection, but that's not what concerns me. The blood work showed some abnormalities that warrant further investigation." My nurse's training recognized the careful phrasing, the way he was softening whatever blow was coming. What kind of abnormalities? His white blood cell count is elevated, but not in a way consistent with a simple infection. He hesitated. "I've consulted with Dr. Ramirez in oncology. She'd like to do more tests in the morning." Oncology. The word hit me like a physical blow. "You think he has cancer?" My voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "We don't know anything yet," Dr. Miller said firmly. "It could be many things. The tests will tell us more." I nodded mechanically, my mind racing ahead to insurance forms, treatment options, medical leave. 1,000 terrifying details. "He's awake now," Dr. Miller continued, his voice gentler. "You can see him." I followed him to Elijah's room in a daze. My little boy looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, connected to an IV and a heart monitor. His eyes brightened when he saw me. "Mommy, they gave me a popsicle." He held up a half-eaten red popsicle as evidence. I smiled through the tears threatening to spill over, sitting on the edge of his bed. "That's great, baby. How are you feeling?" "My head doesn't hurt anymore." He sucked on the popsicle, leaving a red stain on his lips. "Did I fall asleep outside? I had a weird dream." "Something like that." I smoothed his curls back, noting with relief that his skin was cooler. "You need to rest now, okay?" He nodded, already drowsy from the medication. Within minutes, his eyes fluttered closed, his breathing deep and even. I stayed beside him, holding his small hand, trying to absorb the seismic shift that had just occurred in our lives. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Alessio Moretti stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. His eyes moved from me to Elijah, lingering on my son's sleeping face with an intensity that made me uneasy. "The doctor says he'll need to stay overnight," he said quietly. I nodded, not questioning how he knew this before I did. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Moretti." I don't know how we can repay you, but there's no debt, he interrupted, his voice low but firm. Then, after a pause, he looks like his father. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I stared at him, confusion giving way to a dawning horror as connections clicked into place. The familiar copper eyes, the interest in my son, the bizarre coincidence of his appearance tonight. "You know Anthony?" I whispered, my grip tightening instinctively around Elijah's hand. Moretti's expression hardened, confirming my suspicion before he even spoke. Anthony Ricci worked for me before he disappeared with something that didn't belong to him. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Anthony had told me he was an investment banker. A lie among many, it seemed. "I don't understand," I said, though the terrible truth was already taking shape in my mind. "What does this have to do with Elijah?" Moretti stepped closer, his gaze never leaving my son's face. "Everything," he said softly. "Because Anthony Ricci isn't his father. I am." Time stopped. The hospital room, with its beeping monitors and antiseptic smell, faded to white noise as Moretti's impossible claim echoed in my head. That's not possible," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've never even met you before tonight." His eyes, dark, intense, and suddenly familiar in a way that made my stomach drop, remained fixed on Elijah's sleeping form. "You met me once," he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of something dangerous. "6 years ago. The Venetian Hotel Charity Gala. You were working the event, serving drinks." A fragmented memory surfaced. A high-end fundraiser where I'd picked up an extra catering shift during nursing school. The ballroom had glittered with wealth and power, faces I'd only seen in newspapers mingling with politicians and celebrities. I'd been invisible in my black and white uniform, just another server circulating with trays of champagne. "I don't remember you," but even as I said it, another memory stirred, a tall, commanding figure watching me from across the room. A stolen moment in a darkened corridor. A night I'd tried to forget because it had seemed like a dream, a momentary escape from my struggling student life. "You left before morning," he continued, as if reading my thoughts. No name. No number. My cheeks burned with the implication. That doesn't prove anything, and even if... I couldn't bring myself to say it. "Anthony was with me when I found out I was pregnant. He's on the birth certificate. Anthony Ricci was many things. Loyal was not one of them." Moretti's jaw tightened. He knew exactly whose child he was claiming. The room felt suddenly airless. My head spun with calculations I'd never had reason to make before. The timing of the gala, the early weeks of my relationship with Anthony, Elijah's birth, slightly premature but perhaps not as premature as I'd been told. "Why would he do that?" I whispered, more to myself than to Moretti. "Leverage." The single word dripped with contempt. He thought having my son gave him insurance. He was wrong. I looked down at Elijah, at the dark lashes fanned against his fever-flushed cheeks, the small nose that had never quite matched Anthony's, the copper eyes that I'd always attributed to some distant gene in Anthony's Italian heritage. Now, those features rearranged themselves in my mind, overlaying with the man standing before me. "You can't just walk in here and claim my son," I said, finding strength in maternal instinct. "You have no proof." "I had him followed since birth," Moretti replied calmly. "I have photographs of every milestone. His first steps in the park near your apartment, his first day of preschool, the time he fell and needed stitches on his chin last year. Ice slid down my spine. You've been watching us? All this time?" "I protect what's mine." His tone left no room for argument. But I respected the boundaries, until tonight. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising slightly before I remembered Elijah sleeping beside me. I lowered it to a harsh whisper. "You can't possibly expect me to believe you." "What? Orchestrated this entire night? Made my son sick just so you could reveal yourself?" A flash of genuine anger crossed his face. "I would never harm him. The illness is real, and potentially serious based on what the doctor told me." That brought me back to the more immediate concern, Elijah's health. Whatever this man claimed, whatever tangled web Anthony had woven around us, my priority had to be my son. "I need you to leave," I said firmly. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you want, it can wait until Elijah is better." Something shifted in Moretti's expression. A brief softening that vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it on the bedside table. "My private number," he said. "When you're ready to talk, call me. In the meantime, I'll ensure Elijah receives the best care available." Before I could protest that we didn't need his charity, he turned and left, his expensive shoes silent on the hospital floor. I sat frozen, the card on the table seeming to burn with implications. The night stretched endlessly. I dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair beside Elijah's bed, waking at every change in his breathing, every beep of the monitors. Nurses came and went, colleagues I usually chatted with now oddly formal, stealing curious glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Word had spread about my unusual visitor. Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent clarity. Dr. Ramirez, the oncologist, came early, too early, before the usual rounds. She examined Elijah with gentle efficiency, her dark eyes serious behind stylish glasses. "We'll need a bone marrow aspiration," she explained, keeping her voice light as Elijah watched cartoons on the room's small TV. "It sounds scary, but we'll make sure he's comfortable." The procedure was scheduled for 10 a.m. I helped prepare Elijah, explaining in simple terms what would happen, promising ice cream afterward. He was brave in the way children are when they don't fully understand the stakes, accepting my reassurances with complete trust. I changed into fresh scrubs brought by a coworker, washed my face in the small bathroom, and tried not to think about Alessio Moretti's claim. One crisis at a time. The procedure itself was quick but harrowing. Elijah's small whimpers during the bone marrow extraction tore at my heart despite the local anesthetic. I held his hand throughout, murmuring encouragement, singing his favorite songs in a voice that only wavered slightly. "You did so well, sweetheart," I told him afterward, as he drowsily licked the promised ice cream cone in his hospital bed. "I'm so proud of you." "Was I brave like Captain America?" he asked sleepily, the medication making his words slightly slurred. "Braver," I assured him, swallowing past the lump in my throat. He fell asleep midway through his ice cream, the cone listing dangerously in his small hand. I gently removed it, wiped his sticky fingers, and tucked the blanket around him. "Madison." Dr. Ramirez stood in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral. "Can we talk outside?" My heart stuttered. "You have the results already?" "Preliminary findings," she confirmed. "Let's step out so we don't wake him." In the corridor, Dr. Ramirez led me to a small consultation room rather than speaking in the hallway. A bad sign. Doctors delivered good news casually. Bad news required privacy. "Please sit down," she said, gesturing to a chair. I remained standing. "Just tell me." She nodded, respecting my choice. The initial analysis shows abnormal white blood cells consistent with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL. We'll need further tests to confirm, but the presentation is fairly classic. The words hit like physical blows. "Leukemia. My beautiful boy. My whole world. What's the treatment?" I asked, falling back on medical training when emotional processing failed me. "Prognosis? Timeline?" "All has one of the better outcomes in childhood cancer," Dr. Ramirez said, her voice gentle but direct. "With aggressive treatment, the 5-year survival rate is approximately 85–90%. 5-year survival, as if that were reassuring when discussing a 5-year-old child. "Treatment typically involves several phases," she continued. "Induction chemotherapy to achieve remission, followed by consolidation therapy, then maintenance. It's intensive, especially at the beginning. How soon do we start?" My mind was already racing through practicalities: medical leave from work, insurance coverage, childcare during treatments. "Ideally, within days of confirmation," Dr. Ramirez replied. "I've already consulted with Dr. Shriver, our pediatric oncology specialist. He's reviewing the case now and will meet with you this afternoon." I nodded mechanically, trying to absorb the information. And the confirmation? We should have definitive results by tomorrow morning. I've ordered a rush on the tests. Of course she had. I wondered darkly if Moretti's influence extended to laboratory processing times. Thank you, I said automatically. I should get back to Elijah. Dr. Ramirez touched my arm. Madison, do you have someone to call? Family? Friends? You shouldn't be alone right now. I almost laughed. My parents lived across the country, perpetually disappointed in my life choices. I had work friends, but no one close enough for this. Anthony had isolated me from my former social circle, and after he left, I'd been too exhausted from single parenthood to rebuild it. I'm fine, I lied. I'm a nurse. I know how to handle this. Her expression said she didn't believe me, but she nodded. The social worker will come by later today to discuss resources and support groups. And Madison, it's different when it's your own child. Don't try to be the nurse now, just be his mom. I returned to Elijah's room in a daze, my body moving on autopilot. He was still sleeping peacefully, one arm thrown above his head, his dark curls stark against the white hospital pillow. I sat beside him, taking his small hand in mine, and finally let the tears come. Silent, shoulders shaking, careful not to wake him. I don't know how long I sat there before the soft knock at the door roused me. I wiped my eyes hastily, expecting a nurse or perhaps the promised social worker. Instead, Alessio Moretti stood in the doorway again, this time accompanied by an older man carrying a leather medical bag. Neither entered without my acknowledgement, a courtesy that surprised me. "What do you want?" I asked, too emotionally drained for politeness. "This is Dr. Paolo Vincenti," Moretti said, his voice low. "One of Europe's leading specialists in pediatric oncology. I'd like him to review Elijah's case." I stared at them, processing this development. "How did you even know?" I stopped, the answer obvious. Hospital staff. Moretti clearly had people everywhere. "I can leave if you prefer," the older doctor said in a gentle Italian accent. "But I may be able to help." I looked at Elijah, sleeping innocently amid a potential storm of medical and paternal claims. Whatever was happening between me and Moretti, if this doctor could help my son, I couldn't refuse. "Fine," I said curtly. "But I stay in the room." Dr. Vincenti nodded, moving to the foot of the bed where Elijah's chart hung. He reviewed it thoroughly, asking occasional questions that revealed a deep understanding of leukemia treatment protocols. Despite my suspicion of Moretti, I found myself impressed by the doctor's knowledge. "May I?" Dr. Vincenti gestured toward Elijah. I nodded reluctantly. He approached with the quiet confidence of someone who had examined thousands of children, gently checking Elijah's lymph nodes without waking him, observing his breathing, examining the barely visible bruises on his arms that I'd initially attributed to normal childhood roughhousing, but now recognized as a symptom. "I'd like to review the bone marrow samples myself," he said when he'd finished. "With your permission. Can you do that?" I asked, glancing at Moretti. "I mean, legally? I have privileges at this hospital," Dr. Vincenti replied mildly. "Arranged this morning. Of course." Moretti's influence again. I wondered what strings he'd pulled, what favors called in or threats made. "If you think it will help," I said finally. "I'll also want to discuss a treatment option not typically available in the United States yet," the doctor continued. "An immunotherapy approach showing promising results in European trials." Hope flickered dangerously in my chest. "Experimental treatments cost money." "That's not your concern," Moretti interjected. I turned to him, anger flaring through my exhaustion. "It is absolutely my concern. Elijah is my son. I make the decisions about his care, his treatment, his future." "Our son," Moretti corrected, his voice deadly quiet. The tension in the room thickened. Dr. Vincenti cleared his throat discreetly. "Perhaps I should review the current test results and return later to discuss options." Moretti nodded almost imperceptibly, and the doctor excused himself with a sympathetic glance in my direction. When the door closed behind him, I found myself alone with a man who claimed to be my son's father, and had the power to make hospitals bend to his will. "You can't just waltz in here and take over," I said, keeping my voice low but intense. "You have no legal right to Elijah. I could change that with one phone call," Moretti replied, his tone matter-of-fact rather than threatening. "DNA tests, Lawyers, custody hearings, is that what you want? The implication sent cold fear through me. A custody battle with a man like Alessio Moretti would be no battle at all. It would be annihilation. He had unlimited resources, influence, power. I had a nurse's salary and student loan debt. What I want, I said carefully, is for my son to get better. That's all that matters right now. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. On that, we agree. Elijah stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Moretti stepped back immediately, as if sensing my need to shield my son from this complicated situation. Mommy? Elijah's voice was small and confused as he blinked awake. I'm here, baby. I stroked his hair, positioning myself to block his view of Moretti. How are you feeling? Hungry. His face brightened. Can we have pancakes? I'll see what we can do, I promised, my heart aching at the normalcy of his request amid such abnormal circumstances. The car from last night, Elijah said suddenly, noticing Moretti despite my attempt to shield him. You had the big car in the rain. Moretti stepped forward, his expression softening in a way I wouldn't have thought possible. Yes, that was my car. I'm glad you're feeling better, Elijah. My son studied him with innocent curiosity. Are you a doctor too? No, Moretti replied with a small smile that transformed his stern features. Just a friend of your mother's. I bit my tongue at the presumption, but Elijah accepted this explanation easily enough. Do you like pancakes? He asked, with a child's ability to focus on essentials. Before Moretti could answer, a nurse entered with a breakfast tray, not the usual hospital fare of rubbery eggs and toast, but a covered silver plate that looked like it came from a 5-star restaurant. She set it before Elijah with a flourish, revealing perfectly golden pancakes arranged in the shape of a dinosaur, complete with fruit features and bacon spikes. Elijah's eyes widened with delight. Wow! Look, Mommy, it's a stegosaurus, the nurse smiled. Chef Antonio said if you eat all your breakfast, he might send something special for lunch, too. Chef Antonio? Metropolitan General didn't have a chef. I glanced at Moretti, whose expression revealed nothing, but I knew with certainty this was his doing. What do you say, Elijah? I prompted, falling back on routine parenting in this surreal situation. Thank you, he said cheerfully, already reaching for his fork. The nurse left, and I found myself in the bizarre situation of watching my son eat gourmet pancakes, while a Mafia boss who claimed paternity stood by like it was perfectly normal. I should go, Moretti said finally, his eyes lingering on Elijah. I have matters to attend to. Dr. Vincenti will return this afternoon with his assessment. I nodded stiffly, uncertain of the protocol for this unprecedented situation. Madison. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I understand your hesitation. But everything I do now is for his benefit. And 6 years of absence? I challenged quietly. Was that for his benefit too? His expression hardened. I didn't know he existed. When I discovered Anthony's deception, you were already established as a family. I made the decision to watch from a distance rather than disrupt his life. How thoughtful, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Things have changed now, he replied, unruffled by my tone. His health takes priority over all else. With that, he turned to leave, pausing at the door. My driver will remain at your disposal. When Elijah is discharged, he'll take you both home. Before I could protest, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the absurd dinosaur pancakes as evidence he'd been there at all. He's nice, Elijah declared around a mouthful of pancake. Can he come to my birthday party? I forced a smile, my mind reeling with the implications of the past 24 hours. We'll see, sweetheart. Let's focus on getting you better first. Am I sick? He asked, his copper eyes, Moretti's eyes, I now realized, suddenly worried. Like, really sick? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. You have something in your blood that's making you feel bad, but the doctors are going to fix it. It might take some time, and some of the medicine might make you feel yucky at first, but you're going to be okay. I hoped with every fiber of my being that I wasn't lying to him. Will I still get to go to kindergarten? His lower lip trembled slightly. Maybe not right away, I admitted. But we'll talk to your teacher and she can send work home. And when you're feeling good, maybe you can visit your class. He seemed to accept this, returning to his pancakes with the resilience of childhood. I watched him eat, trying to recalibrate my understanding of my own life in light of Moretti's revelation. If what he claimed was true, and the more I looked at Elijah, the more I feared it was, then nothing would ever be the same again. A man with dangerous power and unknown intentions had just walked into our lives, claiming the most precious thing in my world. And I had no idea how to protect us from what would come next. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of medical tests, doctor consultations, and sleepless nights in the uncomfortable hospital chair. Elijah's diagnosis was confirmed: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and a treatment plan began to take shape, a complex roadmap through terrain I never wanted to travel. Dr. Vincenti, Moretti's specialist, worked alongside Dr. Shriver, the hospital's pediatric oncologist, in an unusual collaboration. I sat through their joint presentation on treatment options, clutching a coffee gone cold, trying to absorb words like induction therapy and minimal residual disease, while maintaining a facade of composure. The European protocol I mentioned, Dr. Vincenti explained, his accent softening the harsh medical terminology, combines standard chemotherapy with a targeted immunotherapy that has shown promising results in reducing side effects and improving long-term outcomes. Is it approved here? I asked, my nurse's training prompting the question. Dr. Shriver shook his head. Not yet. It's still in clinical trials in the U.S. But, Dr. Vincenti continued, Elijah could be enrolled in the trial. I've already spoken with the research team. They're prepared to accept him immediately. I didn't ask how this miraculous opening in a likely competitive clinical trial had materialized overnight. Moretti's influence was becoming a constant, unsettling presence. Invisible, but undeniable. What about insurance? I asked, the practical concern impossible to ignore. Will they cover experimental treatment? The doctors exchanged glances. The trial costs are covered by the research grant, Dr. Shriver said carefully, and I've been informed that all additional expenses will be handled. By Moretti, of course. The man was systematically removing every obstacle, taking control in ways both helpful and terrifying. When would treatment begin? I pushed the financial implications aside for the moment. Ideally, tomorrow, Dr. Vincenti replied. Time is of the essence with all, especially considering the aggressive markers in Elijah's blood work. I nodded, trying to process what this meant. Tomorrow my 5-year-old would begin a battle against cancer, with chemicals flowing into his small body, attacking both the disease and his healthy cells indiscriminately. I'll need to prepare him, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and make arrangements for work, for our apartment. All taken care of, came a deep voice from the doorway. Alessio Moretti stood there, immaculate in another perfectly tailored suit, his presence immediately dominating the room. The doctors straightened almost imperceptibly. Medical leave has been arranged with your supervisor, he continued, stepping into the room. Fully paid, indefinite duration. Your apartment is being maintained, and your bills are covered. Anger flared through my exhaustion. You had no right. I merely removed distractions, he interrupted smoothly. So you can focus entirely on Elijah. The presumption was breathtaking, yet beneath my indignation lurked traitorous relief, the crushing weight of financial worry temporarily lifted from my shoulders. May we have the room, please? I asked the doctors, needing to address this intrusion without an audience. They departed quickly, Dr. Vincenti with a sympathetic glance that suggested he understood the complexity of the situation. When the door closed, I turned to Moretti, keeping my voice low to avoid disturbing Elijah, who was napping after his latest round of tests. You can't just take over my life, I said, the words sharp despite my attempt at control. I don't need your charity. It isn't charity, he replied, unmoved by my anger. It's my responsibility, my son. You have no proof he's your son, I interrupted, though the denial felt increasingly hollow each time I looked at Elijah's features. Moretti reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded paper, offering it to me without comment. I took it reluctantly, unfolding what proved to be laboratory results, a DNA paternity test. The conclusion was highlighted in yellow, 99.9998% probability of paternity. My knees weakened. I sank into the nearby chair, staring at the irrefutable evidence. How did you get this? The same way I get everything I need. he said simply. I had samples collected during his initial tests. The violation of privacy should have outraged me, but I was too numb to feel anything beyond resignation. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. What do you want from us? I asked finally, looking up at him. Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, perhaps, or a minute relaxation of his jaw. I want my son to live. Beyond that, we have much to discuss, but not here. Not now. I glanced at Elijah, sleeping peacefully despite the IV in his small arm. His dark curls, Moretti's curls, had fallen across his forehead. The resemblance was painfully obvious now that I allowed myself to see it. He starts treatment tomorrow, I said, focusing on the immediate concern. He'll be scared. I'll be here, Moretti stated, as if his presence at a child's cancer treatment were the most natural thing in the world. He doesn't know you, I pointed out, and I haven't decided how or if to tell him about this. I waved the paternity test before folding it and slipping it into my pocket. That decision can wait, he conceded. For now, I'm simply a friend helping during a difficult time. Friend was hardly the word I'd use to describe Alessio Moretti, but I lacked the energy to argue semantics. Fine, I said, but I make the medical decisions. I sign the forms. I talk to the doctors. Of course. His easy acquiescence surprised me. You've been his mother for 5 years. I respect that. The acknowledgement was unexpected, almost disarming. Before I could respond, Elijah stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Mommy? He called groggily, then noticed our visitor. Oh, hi, Mr. Bigcar. A ghost of a smile touched Moretti's lips. Hello, Elijah. You can call me Alessio. Alessio, Elijah attempted, mangling the pronunciation. That's hard. You can call me Al if it's easier, Moretti offered, moving to stand at the foot of the bed. I blinked at this concession from a man who likely had people killed for showing less respect than proper pronunciation of his name. Al, Elijah repeated with a sleepy smile, like my friend Albert at school, but shorter. Exactly like that, Moretti agreed, his expression gentler than I'd seen it before. Are you still here because I'm sick? Elijah asked with a child's directness. Moretti glanced at me, as if seeking permission before answering. I gave a small nod, curious despite myself to see how he'd handle this. Yes, he said simply. I want to help you and your mom while the doctors make you better. Elijah considered this. Are you rich? Because this room is way nicer than the one Joey had when he broke his arm. I flushed with embarrassment, but Moretti chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Yes, I suppose I am. Does that bother you? Elijah shook his head. Nope. Mom says being rich or poor doesn't make you good or bad. It's what's in your heart that matters. Moretti's eyes met mine over Elijah's head, an unreadable expression in their depths. Your mother is a wise woman. A nurse entered with Elijah's medication, temporarily relieving the strange tension in the room. As she checked his vitals and adjusted his IV, I used the opportunity to compose myself, unsettled by the surreal domesticity of the moment. When the nurse left, Elijah yawned widely. I'm bored. There's nothing to do here. Before I could offer to read one of the books I'd brought from home, Moretti spoke up. Perhaps I could help with that. What do you like to do, Elijah? I like dinosaurs, my son replied immediately, and Lego, and space stuff. Mom got me a telescope for Christmas, but it's hard to see stars in the city. All excellent interests, Moretti said seriously, as if discussing business with an equal. Would you like something to play with while you're here? Elijah nodded eagerly. Moretti made a brief phone call in Italian, his voice low and authoritative. 20 minutes later, a man appeared with several large shopping bags, which he handed to Moretti before departing without a word. Let's see what we have, Moretti said, bringing the bags to Elijah's bedside with the air of a magician about to perform a trick. From the bags emerged an extensive Lego dinosaur set, a tablet loaded with educational games and movies, a small but high-quality telescope, for when you can see the sky again, dinosaur-themed pajamas, and a stuffed stegosaurus that Elijah immediately hugged to his chest. This is the best day ever, Elijah declared, his illness momentarily forgotten in the excitement of new treasures. I should have been annoyed at the extravagance, the obvious attempt to buy my son's affection. Instead, I found myself blinking back tears at the simple joy on Elijah's face, a bright moment amid so much darkness. "Thank you," I said quietly to Moretti, while Elijah examined his new telescope. That was thoughtful. He nodded once, accepting the gratitude without comment. There was something almost vulnerable in his expression as he watched Elijah, a glimpse of the man behind the fearsome reputation. The rest of the day passed in relative peace, with Elijah alternating between naps and playing with his new toys. Moretti stayed, his presence gradually becoming less intrusive as he maintained a respectful distance, intervening only when he could be helpful. When evening came, a nurse appeared with dinner, not hospital food, but a child-friendly meal from what was clearly an upscale restaurant. For me, there was a container of homemade pasta that smelled divine after days of cafeteria sandwiches. "You should go home tonight," Moretti said as I picked at the pasta. "Get proper rest before tomorrow's treatment begins." I shook my head automatically. I'm not leaving him. "Madison." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You've been in that chair for 2 nights. You're exhausted. Elijah needs you at your strongest tomorrow." The logic was sound, but maternal instinct resisted. What if he wakes up scared? What if something happens? "I'll stay," Moretti said simply. "I'll call you immediately if anything changes." I stared at him, searching his face for deceit or ulterior motive. "You want me to leave my sick child with a man he met 2 days ago, with his father?" He corrected, the words still strange and jarring. "He doesn't know that," I reminded him sharply. Moretti sighed, a rare display of frustration breaking through his composed exterior. "Madison, I am not going to kidnap him from a hospital where he's receiving life-saving treatment. I'm offering you 6 hours to shower, change clothes, and sleep in a real bed so you don't collapse tomorrow." Put that way, it made sense. I glanced at Elijah, who had fallen asleep clutching his new stuffed dinosaur. He'd be unconscious for hours, with nurses checking regularly. 6 hours, I conceded finally. "And you call me if he so much as sneezes." "You have my word," Moretti said solemnly. I gathered my purse, feeling strangely disconnected from reality, as I prepared to leave my son in the care of a man who was essentially a stranger. A dangerous stranger with a DNA connection I was still struggling to accept. "My driver will take you," Moretti said, gesturing toward the door where a man in a dark suit had materialized silently. Too tired to argue, I followed the driver to the elevator, through the lobby, and into a sleek black car, identical to the one from that rainy night. As we pulled away from the hospital, a wave of emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Fear for Elijah, confusion about Moretti, exhaustion from the past days of uncertainty. The car stopped in front of my apartment building, the driver opening my door with formal courtesy. "I'll wait here, ma'am. Mr. Moretti's instructions are to return you to the hospital whenever you're ready." I nodded vaguely, trudging up the 3 flights to my apartment. When I unlocked the door, I stopped short in confusion. My apartment, normally cluttered with toys, nursing textbooks, and the general debris of single motherhood, was immaculate. Fresh flowers sat on the kitchen counter. The refrigerator, when I opened it in bewilderment, was stocked with fresh groceries. On the table lay a note in elegant handwriting. "Everything is prepared for when Elijah comes home. Rest well. A.M." The presumption should have infuriated me, but in my exhausted state, I could only marvel at the thoroughness of Moretti's intervention in our lives. I showered in water hotter than I usually allowed myself, letting it wash away hospital antiseptic and days of worry. Clean and wrapped in my robe, I wandered to Elijah's room, needing the comfort of his familiar space. His dinosaur collection was neatly arranged on shelves, his bed made with fresh sheets. I sat on the edge of his bed, picking up the worn T-Rex he'd slept with every night, until the stuffed Stegosaurus had usurped its place. The reality I'd been holding at bay crashed over me then. My son had cancer. My son might not survive. My son's father was not the man I'd believed, but a dangerous criminal who could upend our lives completely. I buried my face in Elijah's pillow and sobbed, releasing days of tightly controlled fear and confusion. I cried until my throat hurt, until my eyes burned, until exhaustion finally claimed me, and I fell asleep clutching the small dinosaur to my chest. The persistent buzz of my phone woke me hours later. I fumbled for it in panic, heart racing as I saw the hospital's number on the screen. "Hello?" I answered, my voice hoarse from crying. "Madison." It was Moretti's voice, calm, but with an undercurrent of tension. "You should come back now. What's happened?" I was already moving, searching for clothes. "Is Elijah okay?" "His fever has spiked," Moretti said, his control slipping enough for me to hear genuine concern. "The doctors are with him now. I'm coming," I said, pulling on jeans and a sweater with the phone pressed to my ear. "Tell him I'm coming." "He's asking for you," Moretti replied, a catch in his voice I wouldn't have thought possible. "I told him you'd be here soon. The driver was waiting as promised." I barely registered the pre-dawn streets as we sped back to the hospital, my mind filled with worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. The elevator seemed unbearably slow as it carried me to Elijah's floor. I ran down the corridor, ignoring the startled looks from night shift nurses I normally worked alongside. Elijah's room was filled with medical personnel, Dr. Vincenti, 2 nurses, and a technician adjusting an IV pump. In the center of this activity, my son looked impossibly small and pale, his cheeks flushed with fever, his breathing rapid and shallow. "Mommy," he whimpered when he saw me, reaching out a hand tangled in IV tubing. I rushed to his side, heart breaking at his distress. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Over Elijah's head, I met Dr. Vincenti's grave expression. "What happened?" "Infection," he said succinctly. "His immune system is compromised from the leukemia. We're starting broad-spectrum antibiotics while we identify the specific pathogen." I nodded, understanding the medical implications all too well. Infection was one of the greatest dangers for leukemia patients, their defenses already weakened by the cancer consuming their white blood cells. Only then did I notice Moretti, standing against the wall, his usual imposing presence diminished by what looked remarkably like fear. His normally perfect suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. "He started shaking about an hour ago," he said, his voice rougher than I'd heard it before. The fever came on suddenly. I turned my attention back to Elijah, stroking his hot forehead as the nurses administered medication through his IV. "You're going to feel better soon, sweetheart. The medicine will help." "It hurts," he whimpered, his small body trembling with chills despite the fever. "Mommy, make it stop. I know, baby, I know." I fought to keep my voice steady, to be the mother he needed rather than the terrified woman I was. The next hours passed in tense vigilance, watching monitors, checking temperatures, adjusting medications. Moretti remained, silent but present, occasionally speaking in low tones with Dr. Vincenti in Italian. I was too focused on Elijah to wonder what they discussed. By mid-morning, the antibiotics began to take effect. Elijah's fever dropped slightly, his breathing eased, and he fell into a more natural sleep. Only then did I allow myself to collapse into the chair beside his bed, the adrenaline of fear giving way to exhausted relief. "You should eat something," Moretti said, appearing at my side with a coffee and a pastry from the hospital cafe. I accepted both gratefully, realizing I was ravenous. "Thank you. For calling me. For staying with him." He nodded, taking the seat across from me. For a moment, we were just 2 people united in concern for the child between us. Not nurse and Mafia boss, not victim and intruder, not even mother and newly discovered father. Just 2 humans terrified of losing something precious. "He's strong," Moretti said after a while, watching Elijah's chest rise and fall with more regular breathing. "Like his mother." The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. "He is," I agreed, "but this, all of this, it's too much for a child his age." "Children adapt," he replied. "They find strength in the people around them, in knowing they're protected, cared for." I studied his profile as he watched Elijah, seeing genuine emotion in the set of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. Whatever else Alessio Moretti might be, his concern for my son, our son, appeared genuine. "What happens after this?" I asked quietly. "When he's better? What do you expect?" Moretti turned to me, his expression serious. "I expect to be part of his life. How that looks, we can determine together." Together, I repeated skeptically. You don't strike me as a man who compromises often. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm willing to learn new skills where Elijah is concerned. Before I could respond, Dr. Vincenti returned with updated test results. The infection had been identified, a common bacterium that responded well to the antibiotics already administered. Elijah's chemotherapy would need to be delayed by several days to allow him to recover, but the prognosis remained positive. He should continue improving over the next 24 hours, the doctor concluded. We'll monitor closely, of course. Thank you, I said, genuine gratitude in my voice. The man might be on Moretti's payroll, but his expertise was undeniable. As Dr. Vincenti left, Elijah stirred, his eyes opening blearily. Mom? He called weakly. Right here, sweetheart, I reassured him. Taking his small hand in mine, his gaze moved past me to where Moretti stood. Al stayed all night, he informed me gravely. He told me stories about Italy when I couldn't sleep. I glanced at Moretti in surprise. Did he? Elijah nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. About a boy who lived by the ocean and had adventures with fishermen. It was good. Not as good as your stories, but good. High praise, Moretti commented, the corner of his mouth lifting. Your mother must be an excellent storyteller. The best, Elijah confirmed, his eyelids already growing heavy again. She does all the voices. As he drifted back to sleep, I found myself wondering about the story Moretti had told, whether it was fiction or perhaps memory from his own childhood. The thought of him as a child, before he became whatever he was now, was strangely humanizing. You should rest too, Moretti said, interrupting my thoughts. I can watch him. I shook my head. I'm not leaving again. He didn't argue, merely nodding as if he'd expected this response. Then at least use the cot they brought in. I'll wake you if anything changes. The offer was tempting. My body ached from tension and poor sleep, and the padded cot looked infinitely more comfortable than the chair. All right, I conceded, moving to the small cot positioned against the wall, but wake me in an hour regardless. Moretti agreed with a small nod. As I stretched out on the cot, I watched him take the chair I'd vacated, his large frame incongruous in the institutional furniture, his attention focused entirely on the small boy in the hospital bed. The image was the last thing I saw before exhaustion pulled me under, my son, sick but fighting, and beside him, the complicated, dangerous man who had altered our lives irreversibly with a single claim of paternity. I dreamed of the gala 6 years ago, fragments of memory returning in disconnected flashes, the weight of a silver tray laden with champagne flutes, the ache in my feet after hours in borrowed heels, eyes watching me across a crowded room, a stolen conversation in a quiet alcove, a night I'd written off as a beautiful stranger's passing interest in a catering girl, a night that had changed everything, though I hadn't known it then. Elijah's infection cleared over the next 2 days, his resilient body responding well to the antibiotics. Dr. Vincenti and Dr. Shriver agreed he was strong enough to begin the modified treatment protocol, a combination of traditional chemotherapy and the experimental immunotherapy that offered our best hope. The morning of his first treatment, I sat beside Elijah's bed, explaining what would happen in simple terms. The medicine is special, I told him, holding his small hands in mine. It's going to find the bad cells in your blood and get rid of them, but sometimes it might make you feel yucky for a little while. Elijah's copper eyes, so like Moretti's, were solemn. Will I lose my hair like the kid on the poster? The pediatric oncology ward had educational posters showing children at various stages of treatment. Of course, Elijah had noticed. You might, I answered honestly. But hair grows back, and we can get you some cool hats if you want. He considered this seriously. Can I get a dinosaur hat, and maybe a space one? Absolutely, I promised, relief washing through me at his acceptance. Children were remarkably adaptable, a blessing in situations like this. A soft knock at the door announced Moretti's arrival. Over the past days, he'd established a routine, appearing each morning, staying through the day's medical procedures, leaving only when Elijah was settled for the night. His presence had become strangely normalizing, as if dangerous Mafia bosses regularly spent their days in pediatric hospital rooms. Good morning, he said, his gaze taking in Elijah's improved color. "Ready for today?" Elijah nodded bravely. "Mom says the medicine might make me sick, but it's fighting the bad cells." "That's right," Moretti agreed, setting a gift bag on the bedside table. "I brought something that might help." Elijah reached eagerly for the bag, pulling out a child-sized leather jacket with dinosaur patches sewn onto the sleeves and back. His eyes widened with delight. "It's just like yours," he exclaimed, looking between the jacket and Moretti's expensive leather coat. I hadn't noticed the similarity, but Elijah was right. The child's jacket was a miniature version of what Moretti often wore, though I doubted the man's contained colorful dinosaur embellishments. "Every warrior needs armor," Moretti said seriously. "This can be yours while you battle the bad cells." Elijah immediately wanted to put it on over his hospital gown. I helped him slip his arms through the sleeves, careful of his IV line. The jacket was beautifully made, soft leather with a satin lining. "Thank you, Al," Elijah said, stroking the leather reverently. "It's the coolest ever." Something flickered across Moretti's face, a raw emotion quickly masked. "You're welcome, Elijah." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Vincenti and 2 nurses, ready to begin the treatment. Elijah clutched my hand tightly as they explained what they were about to do, his brave facade slipping slightly. "I'm scared, Mommy," he whispered. "I know, sweetheart." I squeezed his hand. "But I'll be right here the whole time. And look, you have your special jacket now." Elijah touched the leather sleeve, drawing comfort from the gift. Then, unexpectedly, he reached his other hand toward Moretti. "Will you stay too?" Moretti looked momentarily stunned by the small hand extended toward him. He glanced at me, as if seeking permission. I gave a slight nod, unable to deny my son any comfort in this moment. "Of course," Moretti said, taking Elijah's hand with surprising gentleness. "I'm not going anywhere." And so we formed a strange tableau as the treatment began. Elijah in the center, clutching his mother's hand on one side, and his unknown father's on the other, his small body wrapped in a leather jacket, meant to serve as armor against the battle within his blood. The treatment itself was anticlimactic, clear liquids flowing into Elijah's veins through his IV, no immediate visible effect. When it was complete, he looked disappointed. "I don't feel any different," he said, poking at his arm as if expecting to see the medicine working. "It takes time," Dr. Vincenti explained. "The medicine is very small, like tiny soldiers hunting for the enemy cells." Elijah brightened at this description. "Like special forces? Mom, can we watch a movie?" The normalcy of the request made my throat tight with emotion. "Sure, baby. What would you like to see?" The remainder of the day passed quietly. Elijah watched animated films on the tablet Moretti had brought, occasionally dozing. By evening, the first side effects appeared. Nausea that had him retching miserably into a hospital basin. I held his shoulders, murmuring comfort, while Moretti stood by, his face a mask of helpless concern. When Elijah finally fell into an exhausted sleep, I stepped into the hallway, needing a moment away from the oppressive hospital room. To my surprise, Moretti followed me. "You should get some rest," he said, studying my face with unsettling intensity. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. His expression made it clear he didn't believe me. "Madison, you can't help him if you collapse. Use the suite I've arranged down the hall, just for an hour or 2. I'd been resisting the suite, a hospital room converted into something resembling a luxury hotel, complete with a real bed and private bathroom. Accepting it felt like conceding too much ground in whatever unspoken negotiation existed between us. "He needs me here," I insisted. "He's asleep," Moretti countered. "The night nurse will call immediately if he wakes. You're no good to him running on empty." The logic was sound, but it wasn't really about logic. It was about control, the one thing I'd maintained in the face of Moretti's systematic infiltration of our lives. "Why are you doing all this?" I asked suddenly. "The specialists, the suite, the gifts. What do you really want?" His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I told you that he's your son. Fine, but that doesn't explain." I gestured vaguely at everything around us. "All of this." Moretti was silent for a moment, his eyes darkening. "When I was 10, he said finally, his voice lower than usual, "my younger brother was diagnosed with leukemia. My father, a man of considerable resources, spared no expense for his treatment. The personal revelation surprised me. Moretti hadn't shared anything of himself before. Did he survive? I asked softly. No. The single word carried the weight of old grief. The treatments then were more primitive. He suffered greatly before the end. Understanding dawned. So this is about your brother? His jaw tightened. This is about Elijah. But yes, I know what this disease can do. I know what it's like to watch someone you love fight it. I know the toll it takes on everyone involved. The admission, especially the casual use of love in reference to Elijah, caught me off guard. You don't even know him, I said, though the words lacked conviction. I've known him since the day he was born, Moretti corrected quietly. I may have kept my distance, but I've watched him grow. I know his favorite color is green. I know he's allergic to strawberries. I know he struggled with nightmare about monsters under his bed last year. The extent of his surveillance was both impressive and disturbing. That's not the same as knowing him. No, he conceded. It isn't, which is why I'm here now. Despite the complications it creates in my life and business, the reminder of his business sent a chill through me. Whatever fragile connection might be forming between Moretti and Elijah, the reality remained. This man was dangerous, his world violent and unpredictable. Elijah can never know what you do, I said firmly. If you're serious about being in his life, that part stays completely separate. Moretti's expression revealed nothing. My business interests are irrelevant to this situation. Your business interests are why Anthony disappeared, I pointed out. They're why you have people watching us, why hospital administrators jump when you walk in. Don't pretend they don't matter. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze calculating. You're not afraid of me, he observed, sounding almost puzzled by this realization. The observation startled me. I should be terrified of this man, his power, his reputation, the violence that followed him like a shadow. Yet fear wasn't what I felt in his presence. Wariness, certainly. Confusion, definitely, but not fear. I'm afraid for Elijah, I clarified. For what your world could mean for him. My world also offers protection, Moretti countered, resources, opportunities. At what cost? I challenged. Before he could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway of Elijah's room. Ms. Clark, he's asking for you. I moved immediately, all other concerns forgotten. Elijah was awake, his face pale and drawn, his eyes glassy with medication and discomfort. Hey, sweetheart, I said softly, brushing his hair back from his forehead. How are you feeling? Not good, he admitted, his lower lip trembling. My tummy hurts. I know, baby. I reached for the anti-nausea medication the doctor had prescribed, administering it through his IV line. This will help. Try to drink some water if you can. He took a few sips from the cup I held, then lay back against the pillows. Where's Al? The question surprised me. He's just outside. Do you want to see him? Elijah nodded, and I motioned for Moretti to enter. He approached the bed with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his imposing presence. Hey, buddy, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Rough night? Elijah nodded miserably. The tiny soldiers are making me sick. That means they're working hard, Moretti told him, sitting in the chair beside the bed. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Like when Mom cleaned my room and it looked super messy at first? Elijah asked, finding a connection his 5-year-old mind could understand. Moretti smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features, exactly like that. Elijah seemed comforted by the comparison. Will you tell me another Italy story? The one about the boy and the fisherman? I raised an eyebrow at Moretti, curious about these stories I hadn't heard. Of course, he agreed, settling more comfortably in the chair. Where did we leave off? Ah, yes. The boy had discovered the cave by the shoreline. His voice took on a different quality as he told the story, less commanding, more rhythmic, with traces of an Italian accent that usually remained carefully concealed. Elijah listened with rapt attention, his discomfort temporarily forgotten as he was transported to a sunlit Mediterranean coast. I watched them together, struck by the strange intimacy of the moment. Moretti was good with him, patient, engaging, attentive in ways that belied his fearsome reputation. Whatever else he might be, in this room, with this child, he was simply a man telling stories to soothe a sick boy. The realization was unsettling. It would be easier if Moretti remained a straightforward villain, the dangerous criminal intruding into our lives. His humanity complicated things, making the boundaries between protector and threat increasingly blurred. As Elijah drifted back to sleep, soothed by the story and the medication, Moretti fell silent. His gaze lingered on the boy's face with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "The story," I said quietly. "Was it real? About your childhood?" He nodded, his eyes still on Elijah. "My grandfather was a fisherman before the family business changed direction. Those summers by the sea were before everything else, before he became what he was now." The unspoken words hung between us. "You should use the suite," he said abruptly, standing. "I'll stay with him." Too exhausted to argue further, I nodded. "Wake me if—" "I will," he promised. "Go." The suite was as luxurious as I'd imagined, the bed calling to my aching body. I showered quickly and collapsed onto the soft mattress, intending only to close my eyes for a moment. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. Panic shot through me as I realized I'd slept through the night. I scrambled for my phone. 6:45 a.m., no missed calls. I threw on clothes and rushed back to Elijah's room, expecting the worst. What I found instead was Elijah awake and animated, eating toast, and telling Moretti about his favorite dinosaurs. Moretti sat in the chair I'd vacated, his suit slightly rumpled, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting he'd kept vigil all night. "Mom!" Elijah greeted me cheerfully. "I feel better today, and Al knows tons about dinosaurs." "Does he now?" I said, my eyes meeting Moretti's over Elijah's head. He shrugged slightly. "I did some reading." The image of Alessio Moretti, feared Mafia boss, researching dinosaurs to connect with my son, was so incongruous I almost laughed. Instead, I checked Elijah's chart, noting with relief that his vitals had stabilized overnight. "The doctor came already," Moretti informed me. He was pleased with Elijah's progress. "The next treatment is scheduled for tomorrow." I should have been annoyed that medical updates had been given to him rather than me, but I was too relieved by the positive news to care. "You should go home, change," I told him, noting his disheveled appearance. "I've got things covered here." He hesitated, glancing at Elijah, who was absorbed in a dinosaur documentary on the tablet. "I'll be back this afternoon," he said finally. "Call if anything changes." After he left, I sat beside Elijah, marveling at his improved condition. "You're feeling better, huh?" He nodded, his attention still on the screen. "Al said the medicine is working super fast because I'm extra strong." "Did he now?" I smoothed his curls back from his forehead, checking for fever out of habit. "You two seem to be getting along well." Elijah looked up at me, his expression suddenly serious in that way children sometimes have. "Mom? Is Al going to be my new dad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why would you ask that?" He shrugged, fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "He's here all the time, and he brings me stuff, and he looks at you the way Jaden's dad looks at his new mom in the pictures Jaden showed me." I blinked, processing this childish but uncomfortably perceptive observation. "No, sweetheart. Al is just a friend helping us while you're sick." Elijah considered this, clearly unconvinced. "He has the same eyes as me," he pointed out. "Ms. Peterson says I have special eyes because nobody else in our family has this color." My heart raced. Children noticed things adults thought they concealed. Of course, Elijah had seen the similarity. It was the most obvious physical trait they shared. "Lots of people have eyes that color," I said weakly. "It's just coincidence." Elijah gave me a look that said he didn't believe me but was willing to let it go for now. He returned to his documentary, leaving me to contemplate the inevitable conversation that loomed in our future. Sooner or later, the truth would need to be told. I just didn't know if any of us were ready for what would follow. Block 5. 3 months passed in a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and cautious hope. Elijah responded well to the experimental protocol, his blood work showing promising improvements, the cancer cells retreating before the combined assault of chemotherapy and immunotherapy. As his body fought the disease, Our lives settled into an unexpected routine. Moretti became a constant presence, arranging for the best specialists, ensuring Elijah's comfort, gradually establishing himself as more than a temporary visitor in our lives. The day Dr. Vincenti delivered the news we'd been desperately waiting for. We were all together in Elijah's hospital room. My son sat cross-legged on the bed, wearing his dinosaur jacket despite the room's warmth, playing a board game with Moretti. "The results are excellent," Dr. Vincenti announced, his formal demeanor softening with genuine pleasure. "Elijah is in remission. The treatment has been remarkably effective." The words washed over me like a wave, leaving me lightheaded with relief. "Remission," I repeated, the medical term suddenly the most beautiful word in existence. "What does that mean?" Elijah asked, looking between the adults with curious eyes. "Am I all better?" Dr. Vincenti approached the bed, sitting on the edge to address Elijah directly. "It means the bad cells we've been fighting are gone for now. You'll still need some medicine to make sure they don't come back, but much less than before." "Does that mean I can go home?" Elijah's face brightened at the prospect. "Yes," the doctor confirmed. "You can go home tomorrow. You'll come back for checkups, but you can sleep in your own bed." Elijah cheered, throwing his arms around the startled doctor. Over his head, Dr. Vincenti's eyes met Moretti's, a silent message passing between them. Whatever his other loyalties, the doctor's care for Elijah had been genuine. When we were alone again, an awkward silence fell. Home. The word carried different implications now. The apartment Moretti had maintained in our absence. The life we would return to, but changed, irrevocably, by the man standing before me. "We should celebrate," Moretti said finally. "A proper meal, not hospital food." "Can we get pizza?" Elijah asked hopefully. "With extra cheese?" Moretti smiled indulgently. "Whatever you want." That evening, Elijah's hospital room transformed. Staff wheeled in a proper table, covered with a white cloth. A chef from some high-end restaurant Moretti undoubtedly owned appeared with the promised pizza. Gourmet ingredients arranged artfully, but still recognizably the comfort food a 5-year-old craved. We ate together, the three of us, like a family celebrating good news. Watching Elijah laugh as Moretti told him stories of Italy, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. In these months of crisis, we had become something like a unit. Not conventional, certainly not normal, but connected by more than just Elijah's DNA. Later, when Elijah was asleep, Moretti joined me by the window. The night skyline of the city spread before us, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "We need to discuss what happens next," he said quietly. I nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable. "I've been thinking about that too. I want to be part of his life," Moretti stated simply. "Officially, legally. As his father," I clarified, speaking aloud the title we'd both carefully avoided. "Yes." His expression remained controlled, but tension radiated from his shoulders. "He deserves to know the truth." I turned to face him fully. "And what exactly is the truth, Alessio? That his father is a man whose business associates disappear when they betray him? That his family legacy includes threats and violence?" His jaw tightened. "My world is more complex than you imagine." "That's not a denial," I pointed out. "No," he agreed after a pause. "It's not. Honesty, at least. I appreciated that. I can keep that part of my life separate," he continued. "Many men do. Until it follows you home," I countered. "Until someone decides to hurt you through him." The flicker of darkness in his eyes told me I'd touched on his own fear. Anyone who tried would not live to regret it. The quiet certainty in his voice sent a chill through me, reminding me of exactly who I was dealing with. That's exactly what concerns me. The violence, the retribution, that's not the world I want for my son. "Our son," he corrected automatically. "Our son," I conceded, the word still strange on my tongue. "Who asked me last week if you were going to be his new dad? He sees the resemblance, Alessio. He's not blind." Surprise flickered across his face. "What did you tell him?" "That you're a friend helping us, but he's smart, and he knows I'm not telling him everything," I sighed, leaning against the window frame. "Children deserve the truth, even when it's complicated." Moretti was silent for a long moment, his gaze returning to the sleeping child. "I never expected this," he admitted finally. When I discovered Anthony's deception, I intended only to confirm my suspicions, then resume monitoring from a distance. I didn't plan to become involved. Life rarely follows our plans, I said wryly. Believe me, single motherhood wasn't on my vision board either. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. You've done remarkably well. He's an extraordinary child. He is, I agreed softly. And he deserves better than secrets and half-truths. Moretti nodded slowly. So we tell him. Together. The thought terrified and relieved me simultaneously. Not immediately. Let him recover first, adjust to being home. Then, yes, something shifted in Moretti's expression. A softening I was beginning to recognize as genuine emotion breaking through his carefully maintained facade. Thank you, Madison. 2 simple words, but the weight behind them was anything but simple. I recognized the concession I'd made, acknowledging his place in Elijah's life, in our future. This doesn't solve everything, I warned. There are still boundaries we need to establish. Rules about your work, about safety. Of course, he agreed readily. We'll figure it out step by step. I studied him in the dim light, this dangerous man who had upended our lives, and then, unexpectedly, helped save my child, our child. Why did you really stay away all those years? The truth. He turned back to the window, his profile sharp against the night sky. At first it was anger, Anthony's betrayal, the lie. Then, when I learned about Elijah, I watched from a distance. You seemed happy. A normal family. I told myself he was better off without the complications my presence would bring. And now? I pressed. Now I know better. His voice hardened with conviction. A boy needs his father, especially when that father can protect him from things others can't. Like cancer, like poverty, like the ordinary struggles that had defined our life before his appearance. We'll need time, I said finally, to adjust. All of us. He nodded, accepting this reasonable boundary. I've arranged for a house in the suburbs. Safe neighborhood, good schools, private security. There's a guest house on the property where I'll stay when I'm in town, to be close to Elijah. I raised an eyebrow at this presumptuous planning. And you didn't think to consult me first? The property is in your name, he said, surprising me. You can refuse it if you wish, but consider what it offers Elijah. Space, safety, fresh air, a garden for that telescope he loves. The offer was tempting, painfully so. Our cramped apartment had never been ideal, just the best I could afford. And after months in the hospital, the thought of fresh air and open space for Elijah's recovery was seductive. I'll think about it, I said non-committally. The following day, Elijah was discharged with a treatment plan that stretched into the future, but promised eventual freedom from the hospital. He bounced with excitement as we gathered his things. The stuffed dinosaur, the tablet, the leather jacket he refused to leave behind. Are we going home now? He asked, clutching my hand as we walked toward the elevator. I glanced at Moretti, walking on Elijah's other side, carrying the bag of belongings he'd accumulated during his stay. Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. But when we reached the hospital entrance, a black SUV waited rather than Moretti's usual sleek car. He guided us toward it, with a hand lightly touching my lower back. A gesture both protective and presumptuous. I thought you might want to see the house, he said quietly, for my ears only, before deciding. I hesitated, but Elijah was already climbing into the vehicle, exclaiming over the built-in entertainment system. Just to look, I clarified, meeting Moretti's intense gaze. No promises. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, his hand warm against my back as he helped me into the car. The drive took us away from the crowded city streets, toward tree-lined suburbs where houses sat back from the road, protected by privacy gates and manicured hedges. Finally, the car turned into a driveway that wound through landscaped grounds, before stopping before a house that managed to be both elegant and welcoming. Large windows, warm stone, a wraparound porch. Wow. Elijah pressed his face against the car window. Is this where Al lives? No, Piccolo, Moretti replied, using the Italian endearment that had become habitual. This is for you and your mother. Elijah's eyes widened. For us? Really? I shot Moretti a warning glance. He was overstepping by presenting this as a done deal. But he merely opened the car door, helping Elijah down with gentle hands. "Let's look inside, shall we?" he suggested. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. Spacious rooms filled with natural light, furnished with a blend of elegance and comfort that somehow captured my personal taste, despite Moretti never having asked about it. Elijah ran from room to room, each discovery eliciting fresh exclamations of delight. "Mom, there's a dinosaur room! And look, space for my telescope, and a huge backyard." His excitement was infectious, his joy at simple pleasures like a window seat or a backyard swing, set untainted by adult concerns about strings attached or dangerous implications. As Elijah explored the backyard, supervised by the driver who doubled as security, Moretti joined me on the porch. "You didn't need to do all this," I said quietly. "I wanted to," he replied simply. "For both of you." I studied him in the afternoon light, this complex, dangerous man who had inserted himself into our lives with all the subtlety of a hurricane, yet showed such unexpected gentleness with our son. "We'll need rules," I said finally. "Clear boundaries. Your work stays completely separate. No associates visiting, no business discussions within these walls." Hope flickered in his eyes as he realized I was negotiating terms rather than refusing outright. "Agreed. And we take things slowly with Elijah. No rushing the father revelation until he's ready. Until we're all ready." Moretti nodded, his gaze following our son as he examined a butterfly bush with solemn concentration. "Whatever is best for him. And us?" I asked softly. "What exactly are we, Alessio?" He turned to me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. "Co-parents for now. Beyond that, time will tell." It wasn't a declaration of love or even attraction. It was something more honest, an acknowledgement of the complex bond that had formed between us through crisis and shared concern for our child. Not romance, but something equally powerful, something with potential to grow into more, perhaps, when wounds healed and trust had time to develop. "Time will tell," I echoed, watching as Elijah spotted a rabbit at the edge of the garden and crouched in delight. His small body, so recently ravaged by disease, was regaining strength daily. His future, once terrifyingly uncertain, now stretched before him with promise. Whatever complications Alessio Moretti had brought into our lives, he had also brought hope, protection, and a kind of fierce devotion neither of us had expected. The path forward wasn't clear, but as I watched father and son together in the garden, one discovered too late, the other cherished from his first breath, I allowed myself to believe that sometimes truth came with unexpected gifts. Gifts worth the price of acceptance.